Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Just for Today. We're going to jump right into actually, we're not going to jump right in. I'm sorry to confuse you. But the last few steps we've talked about has been a lot about God and my opinions and my beliefs and things like that. And I just want everyone to know that they are my beliefs, and I have to stick to them, and I'm not going to apologize for my faith in God or the things that I said. Not that I feel like I have to, but I know there's those people out there that don't have a relationship with God and don't believe that there is a God, and that's their right. Their right as a human being in the United States of America. And I'm not going to question that. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm just telling you from my perspective, living day to day, that those are the things that I believe. And I'm not going to back down from those beliefs. And I appreciate your beliefs, and I hope that you appreciate mine. And I want you to know that regardless of how you choose or whatever you choose your higher power to be, that if you follow the steps of this program and follow the ways and laws of Alcoholics Anonymous, they will help you to get sober. And I promise you that. And I hope that my belief in God and my belief system doesn't turn you away from this program. I'm just telling you that is what has worked for me. And I'm going to stick by those guns. And as long as you understand the perspective that I'm coming from, as far as the higher power part of this 12-step program stands, I will not waver on those beliefs. I hope that you stick around, and I hope that you care more about getting sober than you care about my opinions. Okay, and that's what I'll say. Those are my opinions. So I hope that you stay with the program, and I hope that this is enjoyable for you, because we're going to move on now. And step 8 is you have made a complete list of all persons we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Now, that can be dangerous, because you have to go back and, you have to face those things that you did, and you have to face some unpleasantries about the way that you've lived your life, or, and somebody may have legitimately wronged you, but you may have reacted in a way that wasn't very, wasn't conducive to the relationship going on, that if you actually thought about it and were honest with yourself, that maybe, you'd see it from a different perspective. Because again, alcohol makes huge or little problems as big as mountains, and they seem immovable until you remove the alcohol, which makes that small thing workable. Now, we talked about how our lives have become unmanageable. And part of that unmanageability is the things that we can pack down within ourselves. Instead of dealing with issues, that I found that when I have a problem with somebody, that whether I'm right or wrong, I feel obligated to go to them, if I actually care. I mean, sometimes, you have a disagreement with somebody you don't know and you're never going to see them again. And it doesn't, not that you don't care, but it's like, well, that person could be in Guam for all I know. So there's no sense in me trying to track them down. So you just chalk that one up to as, hey, that was just a bad experience. And, I hope that person does well with their life or whatever. Like people that cut you off on the road, you really want to, sometimes you're like, whatever. But other times you're like, I wish I knew your address because I'd follow you right now. But, that's just being human, I guess. And driving around these parts in New England, you can understand how some people might end up like that after a bad day. So try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but that always doesn't work out. So sometimes, we can magnify the problems, because, we have trouble forgiving, we have trouble forgiving ourselves. So how are we going to forgive other people? You have to forgive yourself. So if you go through and you make this list of those persons that you harmed, and I think that you should also write down, with an honest pen or pencil, I'm popping my P's again, that if you write that on a piece of paper with an honest pen, that person and the nature of what was done, either way, because if you've been wronged and you've developed a resentment against this person, that stops the healing process, and that starts to bog you down. And the more of those things that you have, which alcohol can create those things, if we are the type of drinker that, I hope that you know that you are, that, that type of alcohol abuse that has led you to be hearing my voice. You realize is that, I was watching a show the other night, and this guy was convicted of murder. And I'm not saying that anybody's out there is a murderer. They might be. I don't know that. That's for you to know. That's on your resume. But this guy said something very prophetic. He said he eventually admitted to it. He said, I did what you guys found at that address on that day. And the problem is you have to lock me up because every time I drink, that's what happens. See, when he was sober, he didn't have any problems with the law. I was the same way. If you look back through my history from the time I was 12 until I stopped drinking at 27, every single time I was in major trouble, and it wasn't really that major. I think the biggest thing I ever had happen was a DUI. That's big enough because I could have really killed somebody or myself, and I'm glad I didn't. Thank you, God, that I didn't, and but these bad things can happen to you if your personality changes when you drink. If you become a completely different person and you do things that you normally with a sober mind wouldn't do, well, that's a problem. That's like a skeleton key to trouble, because, and especially if you get to the point where the next day you don't remember what you did after 10 o'clock. I had many nights like that, and I was out there in the world 6 hours after, the last thing I remember. So I could have done anything at any time. And I'm lucky that I never did anything really bad. But those things were bad enough. And every time that I looked through my history and there was major bumps in the road, things that prevented me from having the kind of life I now know, wish I learned it earlier, but you have to run the course. Some of us have to be beat on the head 700 or 800 times for it to finally sink in. Solid Irish mahogany. I'm banging on my head right now. For those of you who don't have the visual, which none of you do, but what I want you to understand is that those bumps in the road could have been avoided if you hadn't been drinking that night. And you're not going to have one of those problems today if you don't drink today, right? You might have a problem. Something might happen to you, but you're going to learn to face those bumps in the road because they're little ones. Sometimes they're big, and we know what those big ones are, like losing a loved one or, you have a disease or something like that. But drinking isn't going to get rid of the disease. It's going to make it worse, and it certainly isn't going to bring that person back. I know it can kill the pain, but a lot of times we're better off just feeling the pain because then we realize is that, this is just life. This is just life. And it is complicated enough without bringing these bumps in the road, these things that make our lives stinky, because there's enough of those by themselves. So by making this list, we write down the people that we've harmed and in the way that we've harmed them, and we talk to them, and we say what we want to do is I want to make amends to all those people that I've hurt. I want to do that if I can. And one of the best ways to do that is to give up, is to stop drinking, is to say, I'm no longer going to let alcohol make me into something that I'm not. I will be not made that way. I will be not pictured that way. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to shake as far as reputation goes, but you can do it, and it's very fulfilling. It is very gratifying to have people that didn't want you around look you square in the eye and see you for what you were intended to be. I'm going to bring up God again, but God knows what you are. God knew I was a drunk. God knew I was playing around out there and making a menace wherever I went. He knew that. And you know what? He saw what I was. And he knew what I could be if I had just give up the alcohol. that is the beginning of it all, because that's the thing. That's the trigger point. It makes you into somebody that you're not. It made me into somebody that I hope that I'm not. Remember when I was 12, I said, I'm never going to smoke, I'm never going to drink, I'm never going to do drugs. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Strike three, you're right here. I was wrong about every single one of them. I had become everything that I never planned to be. So the best laid plans go awry, as they say. But I became this thing, It was like, the name Dan Sullivan may have a certain connotation here, and I hope that it's a trustworthy name to you, because I hope that that's where my sobriety has led me back to integrity, which is another great thing to have. And that name